Hi there, welcome to No Nonsense Whiskey. My name's VinPF, and you might have seen a couple of weeks ago I did a really cool video with the guys at EToH over in Copenhagen. Now, the idea behind those guys is they're rapid aging their whiskies, and I implore you to go and check that video out if you want to see me actually taste the whiskies. Now, back in that video, I promised that I was going to release a full-scale video with their chat. We did a really good web chat with them. They did a really good presentation and a little bit of talk afterwards, and I kind of cut that down quite heavily to try and fit into a general sample Saturday video. But the conversation was awesome, and I got a lot of questions in the comments that will be answered by this video. So grab a dram and strap in for the long haul, because it's a pretty long video. It's going to be about a sort of an hour's time, and hopefully you'll enjoy the video and let me know what you thought in the comments below.
EToH Spirits is a company that I founded 3 years ago. I wanted to create a whiskey or spirit company, and therefore I chose the shortest name possible, being EToH, being the chemical abbreviation for ethanol, for spirit. And it is a name that should signal that we're not trying to adhere to any romantic or geographic placement. So like there's no glens, loch, monasteries, churches, anything, castles, cities. This is just us, and we make spirit. Currently the team is myself and Alexander, who's joining me, and the guy on the right in the tweet code is Johan, a Swedish guy who does our sales and logistics, and we've got Mikkel on the left, which is working on our web shop and online sales. I think it says yeah. I have a background as food science engineering, so engineer just like you, but maybe a bit more soft engineering, more about chemistry and not so much about machinery and stuff. I have a degree as a master brewer and used to run a brewery, and I'd say that I have all the experience that one should have in terms of malt. Like I fully understand malt and yeast and fermentations. So it was the obvious choice for me to pursue something that was maybe a bit more, what do I say? Maybe I got a bit bored with making beer, and I wanted to take beer to the next level, which for me is whiskey. It's just more complex. It's just more aesthetic in whiskey than beer. I still enjoy beer, but I think whiskey might be a bit more exciting for me. So that was the idea. We started partnering with Copenhagen University to engage and involve in how we can actually see this process. I had this idea that I didn't want to wait 10, 12 years from my beginnings until I had something I was satisfied with. Coming from a brewery, you learn to work with constant quality control. And just the fact knowing that if I started a process today, I wouldn't really know if I were doing my things right after 10 years, because you don't know until it's done. So for me, it was just, I want to stay in control of the process, and I will put a higher degree of engineering or crafting into the process. So I want to design the process, I want to design the product that we are creating, instead of just playing the waiting game and see how something turns out. For me, that was too much of luck and guesswork, and I would much rather be in control of what I do. So I got Alexander on board.
Yep.
Like a year ago, you started as a student.
Yes, so I actually was looking into aging gin, and I had one food science class, and the teacher said that he actually knows a guy who does similar thing with whiskey, and I just contacted Tobias, and that was a hit. Like we started this project, and I analyzed the composition of the whiskey in comparison to some commercial stuff. I think we had around 15 commercial samples. And as we've been progressing our fast acceleration aging, we could see that we actually getting closer to these commercial samples. So by applying different parameters, we could see results, what's working, what not, plus of course taste-wise. We've been able to judge it. So yeah, from the beginning, the goal was to create fast spirit, and I think the idea was to do it in around 2 weeks. And that's what we try to keep on. And that's, if I would have to say which parameters are the most important which we use, it's definitely the temperature, ultrasound, and the oxygenation. And we actually already created 4 different products with different degree of ultrasound added, different aging time, and some of them even had some peaches in. That's some shout out to Donald Trump living now.
The initial ideas behind our first releases is to prove that we can make classic whiskies. Since our products are so alien to some people, I think it's nice to give them some comfort, some safety. So we work with, in the first one, Endeavor is aged on sherry. Been apart is a French inspiration in terms of French fortified wine and brandy, and Call of Excise Duty is focusing on port cask. So we're giving the consumer an idea of navigation marks to like where are we compared to traditional whiskey. And then I think on the long run we will expand with much more weird or groundbreaking or disruptive trials and products like the one we tried for now, which is not extreme, but it actually worked quite well. The idea of mixing peaches and port together is a quite good mix of like a deep bouquet from the port, which is like really like dark red berries, and then you get this more like more mellow stone fruit aroma from the peaches. So it kind of worked, and it was just I wanted to do something about Trump being double impeached, so it was just obvious for us to do this one. Yeah.
Yeah, and like this extraction of peaches is also only possible because of ultrasound. So maybe you've seen some videos on YouTube while they checking this ultrasound extraction and how to make whiskey faster, but they all do it in this commercial cleaning ultrasound bath. So our ultrasound route is a bit different than that. First of all, our power in the ultrasound is 10 to 20 times higher, and also when they just place the blue cap bottle or any kind of bottle inside the bath, the focus area is totally different. We have our design casket which we just put into the road, and our focus area is around 500 mils. So this high energy is just straight pump into this casket filled with chips. That's provides extreme extraction of wood flavors. Or if we're not putting wood, we can put peaches and extract fruits. So that's the ultrasound route from the producer website, and the temperature there is around 550 degrees, which is like on the surface of sun. That's like small explosions inside the liquid, cavitations, and they provide this extraction. Also, the whole system works in this enhanced temperature. That's mostly because at the higher temperature the reactions goes faster. Plus, there are many scientific papers which shows that the process of esterification and transesterification is the most efficient at this temperature. And of course, for us, this fruity flavor of esters is the most important. There is also a thing about the flow rate. I don't know if you heard about the Jefferson's whiskey, or bourbon. They age it on a ship, and the barrel just constantly moves there, so it touches wood and it doesn't, and that's what we applied as well in our system. So in general, it's like many things applied in one instrument.
That's really interesting, that is, because like you said earlier about everything I've seen about ultrasonic has been in those little cleaner baths,
Yeah.
which obviously doesn't quite it does give a result, but like not a very quick or very good result, I think. But
Because also there are some scientific papers which show that kind of extraction, but when you try to calculate how much energy they use, it's more what we are like, not the commercial one.
But I also think we are trying to do something that's quite difficult because we're combining several parameters. Like Tom Licks from Cleveland makes some fine bourbons with their like pressure system, where they pressurize and depressurize cubes or
Whole
pieces of
cask
wood.
sometimes, I think.
Yeah,
Just
even
briefs.
with the idea of wood being a sponge, and when you press a sponge, water comes out, and when you release, water goes back in. So that's his idea of how to extract more from the wood to create better whiskies or bourbons. Brian from Lost Spirits does something else with light. Uses light to depolarize the wood and affect some kinetics in the molecules of and I think what we try to do is combine them all in real time, and I think it's more difficult to control temperature and ultrasound rotation and oxygen all at the same point. But I think we make a product that is closer or with a higher degree of control than compared to other whiskies. That's at least my belief.
And of course, the extraction is not everything. If we're just gonna extract acids from wood, it's not gonna taste nice. So we have to transform them into esters. And that's where we use also our acid catalysis. And you haven't seen the bottle probably, but it's actually everything is written here. I can send you some labels. We're pretty transparent about that.
yeah, you sent me a couple of labels with it, I think. So
Yeah.
for the Endeavour and the other one, I've got the labels for those. They're very interesting.
Yes. So we actually add acid there, which is the hydrochloric acid, and it acts as acid catalyst. So it's very low quantities. We're talking about 50 milliliters of 30% acid for the 220 liters of whiskey. So it doesn't even change the pH. But we had some experiments which showed that the esterification was vastly increased. But we also don't use it now for every single whiskey. If we taste it and the fruitness is there, we don't need to add it.
When you're designing a new run, do you do some like research and development runs and see what you want to change with the recipe, or do you have a pretty good idea about where you're going with each one now?
I think for now the problem is that our prototype reactor, we call it Mark One, is basically our prototype. So like if we do a test, we test in this one. Like we can't test smaller. That means going back to the laboratory, but that's difficult because then we can't run all the processes at the same time. But we have an idea of about what we want to create, and then we do like a daily check on the machine so we can adjust accordingly as it progresses. But by now we fairly know what to expect from which parameters. But the first time we use a new kind of barrel, obviously will need to be more cautious and aware about what things we are creating and how to control them.
Okay.
The machine is I call it a reactor because you have rods of wood that you put into something. So for me, that is a reactor. I basically built it together with my dad and a smith who did all the welding. So we humbly named it the Jensen reactor because that's my surname and my dad's name. He's a retired engineer, so it was a fun project for him as he's no longer working. And I enjoyed being together with him. So we basically had this idea that, well, this might illustrate a bit more if we put on the pictures. So we have a reactor on the left in which we put whole barrel stage from disassembled, freshly emptied barrels, sherry, port, bourbon, red wine, whatever we can get hold of, what we think is interesting. And it's circulating constantly through all these sensors and loops, through this filter that you see on the right. And inside the filter is the rod of the ultrasound machine that generates these sound waves to affect the liquid. And in that filter area, we also work with either special proprietary chips, oak chips, or we make our own home toasted pieces of barrels that we cut up and run with our own toasting program. So we play around with whether you want more oakiness or more like spirit, like bouquet from a wine. So whether we work with, because working with chips is like working with a bourbon barrel. It's new oak that's either been charred or toasted. So it gives the same benefits as using a new barrel, whereas using used barrels gives typically more balanced flavor, and also give that inherent flavor of what was stored in the cask. So we play around with the different ratios of barrels and chips and what kind of chips, and we can also, which I think is a great thing, we mix the barrels. Like, we're not bound to having to start with one cask because we basically build the cask composition. So we can have a mix of, say, brandy and sherry in one batch. We don't need to like store it 2 times because we need to be double barrel aged. We can just make it all in one process. And we said this from in the beginning, that it's been really great that we can document and validate all our results through research with the University of Copenhagen. A great friend of it was that I got to meet Alexander. I got to hire him. It's a good way of like feeling if there's mutual chemistry when you're working together on the project. But I have a lot of students going through. I think we've done 10 projects so far, and in all they just really bring a lot of keen like energy and effort into this because they haven't worked in any businesses before. So they really comes with all these great ideas. Some might be too far out, but in general they really benefit us because they have access to all the current new knowledge from the world of science. So that has really helped us to get where we are today. So I think Endeavour was our Virgin Voyage, like our first release, and we really wanted to do something really interesting about it, but also at the same time playing it a bit classical. So it's aged on sherry, which is a classical whiskey. We went for brandy as a different option than bourbon because we think it has similar properties in terms of age and usage, the barrel itself, but maybe a bit more interesting, a bit more fruitier note than if you store it on bourbon barrels. Maybe less vanilla, but more fruity. So that was us. That was basically the idea to show what we could do in a whiskey. And so far, I think the reception has been quite good. And this is real whiskey for me. It's quite classical, but we also give it a bit of a twist.
Like a lot of people say, it's very easy to drink. I think that's also because of the aging at 52%. It's very mellow, slightly sweeter.
Yeah, and to clarify one thing, we don't distill. We have an idea or wish to distill at some point in the future, but currently we rely on other distillers allowing us to buy some of the new make, which sometimes can be difficult. So sometimes you need to buy spirits through middlemen who trade in bulk spirits. So when it says that this is this slide that it's a 1-year-old malt whiskey, blended malt whiskey, that is because when the distiller distills, their process is to put everything on barrels, because that's how the logistics works. Everything goes into barrels, and these bulk traders, they buy up these barrels and empties them and put them in plastic or steel containers, and that's what we buy from them. So technically, the whiskey was aged for a very short time before it got to us. So they claim it's a 1-year-old, but it is basically a clear white liquid that is new make to us. And in Bonaparte, for example, we got hold on some 3-year-old base whiskey, a blended malt whiskey. And we thought it was interesting to add that to the machine, because what happens if you add something that already has some age? Will we get double the amount of intensity? But it turned out that we actually basically see the same amount of like aging congeners. It doesn't matter if it's aged or not. What matters is the process in the machine. So I think we will mostly stick with unaged spirit. That being said, it's not a rule that we only work with that, but it's just I think it's what makes most sense to me, because it is what that proves the process and what can be maybe most interesting to people. It might be more easy to understand what we're doing. Yeah. Bonaparte was this whiskey inspired by a French feeling. So the Bonaparte relates to Napoleon Bonaparte. We gave him a quote on the back label. So this was our achievement, or a try to get these like spicy, complex, woody aromas into whiskey, and maybe a bit more pleasing, because we bottle it at 42%, so it's also quite you could say entry level. I think again easy to drink. I don't know if I'm a fan of like extreme whiskeys. I like Brookletic. I like other stuff that's like really going in one direction. But I also think that whiskey should have the purpose of being a drink that you can continue to drink without pushing for binge drinking in any way. But if you can get too much of it, then I think the balance is off. I think it's important that a person, a guy, a girl, can always return and will keep coming back. That's important for me. We have a problem that we always get the question like, why do we accelerate? Okay. For me, it's you accelerate.
No. Yeah, it's just like nothing's wrong with whiskey. Why would you accelerate it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we would not be able to do it traditional way, as you mentioned before. It's just not sustainable for such a small company. And yeah, we definitely can react to certain situation on the market. We can just create whatever we want from the beginning. We can adjust during the process. And especially for me, working with ultrasound, it's like we can extract flavors which are not extractable other way. That's mostly what our instrument ultrasound, which we got, is used for homogenization and extraction. So I'm just looking forward to working, for example, with the coffee, which was already proven to have amazing flavor extraction while using the high ultrasound. I don't know what else. Why?
Yeah, it's for me. The point I wish to get through with is that we created the whiskies. So instead of people playing the waiting game, we made this whiskey to taste how we wanted it, and for that we needed control. There are critics who will say that, well, isn't it just cheap? And is it? I mean, yeah, you could say that I pay less rent in terms of storage warehousing for all the barrels, but I think you consider the time, like the amount of time and energy we put into this, and the research and the working with the machine justifies that we are just as much a whiskey with a reasonable price tag compared to somebody who just has a huge warehouse running at high efficiencies and just doing that. So for me, it's I feel more at home doing this than to have a classical distillery.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that as well. It's something. I mean, the small batch nature of what you're doing, the running costs, the setup costs, that sort of thing, will make this just as expensive as any other bottle of whiskey. That said, if this ended up being like a mass-produced item, the cost would be vastly reduced because you wouldn't have to store anything ever.
You're right that on paper with a big ass machine we could make some big ass amount of whiskey. Yes, but for me it's not like so we made 400 bottles of this, and I'm not keen on putting on bottle numbers like bottle 33 out of 400 because everything is limited, and I don't have the feels to print it all over the label like limited edition, super limited edition, because it's a way of misleading people actually.
Yeah, fully agree. Fully agree. Yeah, I think it's a really fascinating way of doing things, and the way you've managed to combine all three of those important ingredients together in kind of one machine. I mean, I saw on the slideshow there that you had like a version 2. Are you planning on making some upgrades or making a new reactor at some point?
Yeah, this is the different version of the drawing. I think we are working with light. We're trying to work with enzymes, a way of getting the wood different from the start. By technical reasons, you can't have enzymes in spirits because the proteins fully denature in 60% ethanol. So we need to treat the wood with enzymes before the whiskey treatment. And we have some other ideas. There will be no such thing as to say now we have closed the ring. Now this is the final product. We can always find spaces for improving, for sure.
Yeah, and I imagine we'll just keep moving to the next idea and trying new experimental things just to see what happens. The liquids I've got, and you were right what you said there. There's always going to be people that are just they won't care about it. They'll just say no, it's not the way I want my whiskey, and that's fine, But there are definitely going to be people out there like me who are interested in seeing how this develops over time, because it's so quick, and that's what I have to remind myself when I'm drinking this whiskey. Like it's like, I mean, yeah, 3 years is one of them, but then 7 days, to produce something that's quite like easily a decade equivalent, and from my understanding of all the processes, like if you just use ultrasound on its own, then what you get is a kind of like the new make spirit still is part of the liquid, so you're getting all of those malty notes, those biscuity notes that come from a very young whiskey. Whereas in your process, you're working hard to adjust those chemicals as they would over the decade in a very short amount of time.
Yes, it is easy to extract. There's many methods of just putting flavors together, but to combine them and give that elegance of age is what takes some workarounds to make it happen.
It took us a while as well to figure out the last component, and that was definitely the oxygen. Like we had these all flavors, and we had like 3 layers, and they just haven't been bounded together. And we started to pump pure oxygen in, and it totally changed the flavor as well.
So when the oxygen is in the system, are you introducing it in such a way where it's
constantly circulating through, and you've got a kind of exhaust as well. Is that how that's working?
We actually don't need to release it. It's still a small amount. I don't know if we're gonna give you exact amount now, but it doesn't pressurized.
We took some calculations
Okay, so
on
we
you can calculate the permeability of a barrel, and then you say if you have 10 theoretical years. So how much air does one cask take up in 10 years time? That is probably the amount of oxygen that we should add to our process. And surprisingly, it is very small volumes. I mean, it's not like that you are whipping something. It is just a very slow, we call it micro-oxygenation. It's not about like blasting with air. It's about tiny bubbles of oxygen that is entered slowly so that they partly oxidize, but also changes the redox state of different molecules.
There is also the acetal-aldehyde ratio, which changes. So you produce small aldehydes. And when you produce small aldehydes, you can after that create more esters. So I think it's all combines together at the end.
So basically what you're doing is when you decide what you're going to do next, you're literally sitting down and calculating these things together, running the numbers to see exactly the kind of the power you're putting on the sonics, exactly how much oxygen you're putting in. Are you changing the temperature at all, or are you just going with the temperature, whatever it comes out as?
Yeah.
I think for now we have so many unknowns that we know the temperature works. We've tried, I think, 60, 62, and 66. We might try 70, 71 at one point. Definitely not lower, but could be higher.
Yeah.
There is some molecules that at some temperatures simply start to degrade. The same way that like the feeling of jammy flavors, like cooked. So we're not. It needs to be a gentle process. So we're still working with that for sure. Again, there are no objective truths in this field. Like it's all testing and trial.
That's the important thing that people will need to realize when we're talking about this process, is that it's not a harsh industrial process. You're taking real care to do it gently but quickly.
Yeah,
I think that's probably fair to say.
I think we try to call it craft. Like, yeah, I don't know. It is difficult. I have a food science background, and for me, mass produced is just a way of saying that something is bigger. But yes, many mass produced companies, they go for cheaper options of doing it. So there is this inherent thing for mass production and industrial scale is bad. It doesn't need to be. But yes, we try to basically do the same thing that happens in a barrel. We bond ethanol and wood together, and then we say we change the physiochemical state of the whiskey, but we don't do anything. We don't add colors, aromas, try to do something weird about it. It's just water, whiskey, and barrels, and then we change the physics. That would be my best answer.
No, I really like that, and that's a really good summary for what's going on. I'll definitely use that little bit there in the video about the overall summary of it. What do you think? I know you touched a little bit about what you're going to be doing on the future, but what do you think is kind of like around the corner for you guys? Are you going to start trying to sort of push out into like the UK market and things like that at some point, if you can? I know we talked about Brexit a little bit earlier, but if you're able to, obviously it would be great to see that sort of thing available to purchase.
I think we would love to go to the UK. I think it's a bit like, how to say, maybe it's not like selling sand in Sahara, but to sell whiskey in its home country is daunting. Some people might say it sounds stupid. Like if you would try to sell pork meat to Denmark, like why would you sell pork over here? Because we are the guys exporting it. But yes, there's a crowd for whiskey. And I don't feel attached to Denmark that much. So we want to be in as many countries because that also means that we get to travel a lot and meet people. But as of now, we have no plans with importers in the UK. We have interested web shops, but the web shop says that we need to have an importer.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that's interesting because I know for a fact that at least a few people that watch this video will be interested in at least trying the liquid.
Yeah.
So hopefully, when a lot of this stuff blows over that we're going through now, and things get a bit easier to manage, I'll look forward to seeing the things you produce in the future just being available. That would be lovely because I think right now it'd be tough for people outside of maybe not Denmark, but outside of the EU to get hold of it. Because I guess the websites that you actually stock on do ship around different countries in Europe.
We're looking at our own web shop, but it's just, you know how it is. Alcohol has for centuries been a product that just has more rules compared to any other food product or any other product, I think. I think there's something like in your constitution, there's something about that, like the illegal distilling is treason and beheading and stuff like that. It used to be like really, really tough crime to work with spirits. So exporting spirits is difficult with different rules and etc. etc. But I mean, we can try to sell it, but it depends on so many local rules and factors.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you going to be working more with the university still? I guess that's going to be an ongoing thing for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so. We posted it on website, but yeah, no answer yet. But I think I will just need to come back to my department and maybe do the pitch to first year students, first years of master. That's usually better. But that would be good.
Yeah. And in general, universities returning back to normal, because I basically can't go there. Like yeah. It's just so many rules about restrictions that you can't visit and you can't have lab work, which is kind of essential for us. So many of the students today, they need to study from home, and it's difficult to do to make results when you're at home, basically.
Okay, well, to be honest with you, I think I've got everything. I mean, I had some questions, but you covered most of them in the presentation, which was fantastic. I mean, if you don't mind, I'll probably use bits and bobs of that throughout the video.
Sure.
I think you've done something really, really good here, and hopefully people will be interested. I think that's fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I've got a worldwide audience, but I think most of it's concentrated in Europe. So I think they'll be interested. Genuinely, I think they'll be interested. So hopefully, I can send a few people over to you. So just to close, then, if you can, I mean, I already know, but if you can tell me where people can find you on social media and websites and whatnot, I can use that in part of the video.
Yeah. We are on Facebook as EToH Spirits. We are on Instagram as EToH Spirits. We're not on Snapchat or TikTok or stuff like that. And we have a website, and we will have a web shop opening hopefully this week. And it might even be shipping to the UK. But maybe with some taxes.
Yeah. We are also you're also gonna be redirected to our domain when you're just gonna put thisisnotwhiskey.com.